Over 1.6 million people moved to Australia in just 2 years, a record-breaking surge that's now triggering a political storm behind closed doors. But here's what's shocking. According to leaked government documents, officials may be planning to cut immigration by a massive 80%, and they've been keeping it quiet. That's not just a policy shift, that's a full-blown reversal of decades of open-door migration. So, what's really going on? Why would a country built on immigration suddenly pull the brakes so hard? Is it just about housing and jobs, or is there something deeper, like national identity, political power plays, or even environmental collapse? The truth is murky, and what we're about to uncover is more complex and controversial than the headlines let on. In this video, we break down the 10 real reasons behind Australia's secret immigration reset. Some expected, some shocking. And trust me, reason number 7, it might change the way you see this whole debate. Number 1. Economic pressures are hitting a breaking point. Australia's economy might look strong on paper, but for everyday Aussies, things are getting painfully tight. The cost of living has skyrocketed, with grocery bills, energy prices, and especially housing costs climbing to record highs. In major cities like Sydney and Melbourne, young families are being priced out of the market, while renters are facing double-digit increases year after year. But here's the controversial part. Many experts believe mass migration is a key factor behind the surge. With over 1 million new arrivals in a short span, the demand for housing has exploded, but supply hasn't kept up. Construction delays, labour shortages, and zoning restrictions have made it nearly impossible for the market to respond fast enough. As a result, competition for homes has turned vicious. Investors snatch up properties, prices spike, and locals are left wondering why their government isn't doing more to fix it. This growing tension is now boiling over into policy discussions. Behind closed doors, some officials argue that slashing immigration could cool the housing market, ease inflation, and give the economy room to breathe. And while not everyone agrees, some economists say immigrants actually boost the economy in the long term. The pressure to act is mounting fast. So is this just economic common sense or a political scapegoat? Either way, the government is feeling the heat, and reducing immigration is starting to look like the quickest way to calm public outrage. But as you'll see in the next section, this isn't just about dollars and cents. The cracks in Australia's infrastructure are starting to show, and immigration might just be the tip of the iceberg. Number 2. Australia's infrastructure is buckling under pressure. Imagine stepping onto a packed train where there's no room to move. And every stop, more people squeeze in, or waiting 6 hours in an emergency room, only to be told there are no beds. For many Australians, this isn't a rare nightmare. It's becoming a daily reality. Why? Because the country's infrastructure simply isn't keeping up with the explosive population growth. Hospitals are overbooked. Public transport is at full capacity. Schools in urban centres are overflowing, with temporary classrooms popping up just to handle demand. And yet, migration numbers continue to rise. The system was never designed for this level of intake in such a short period of time, and now it's showing serious cracks. According to internal reports, some Australian policymakers believe the only way to stop the bleeding is to hit the brakes on immigration hard. Cutting numbers by 80% would give governments time to catch up, invest in infrastructure, and relieve the intense pressure on essential services. In their view, this isn't just a political strategy, it's a national survival tactic. But here's the twist. Critics argue that immigration isn't the real problem. Poor planning is. They say blaming migrants is an easy way out, and that with proper investment and smarter urban development, Australia could thrive with a larger population. Still, the public frustration is real, and politicians know it. So is this about fixing systems, or fixing blame? Either way, the leaked documents show that infrastructure overload is one of the main drivers behind the secret plan to slash immigration. And as we'll see next, the political stakes are even higher than the logistical ones. Number 3. Politicians are playing the immigration card before the next election. Here's the part no one likes to admit. Immigration isn't just an economic or social issue, it's a powerful political weapon. And in Australia, it's becoming one of the most explosive topics heading into the next election. Behind closed doors, strategists are watching the polls closely, and what they're seeing is causing panic. A growing number of Australians believe the government has lost control of the borders. That fear is being fueled by headlines, rising rents, and social media outrage. In working-class suburbs especially, where public services are stretched thin and job competition is fierce, the narrative that immigration is to blame is gaining traction fast. Political advisors know this, and they're now pressuring leaders to take a tougher stance before voters turn on them. Leaked briefings suggest that cutting immigration by 80% isn't just about solving problems, it's about winning back trust. It's a move designed to send a loud, clear message: we're in control again. Some see it as a desperate attempt to appease angry voters and steal support from right-wing populist parties that have been gaining ground. But there's a dark side to this strategy. Critics say using immigration as a campaign tool is dangerous and divisive, reducing real people to political talking points. They warn that it could spark xenophobia, damage international relationships, and tear at the fabric of Australia's multicultural identity. Still, in the world of politics, perception is everything, and with the next election looming, cutting immigration might be the bold, controversial move some leaders think they need to stay in power. Number 4. National security is quietly driving the agenda. While it's rarely shouted from the rooftops, national security is one of the most sensitive factors behind Australia's immigration crackdown. In recent years, intelligence agencies and defence analysts have quietly raised concerns about how fast, high-volume migration could complicate surveillance, border control, and internal stability, especially in a world that's growing more unpredictable by the day. Let's be clear, there's no direct evidence linking immigrants to widespread security threats, but that hasn't stopped some within government circles from pushing the narrative that lower immigration equals tighter control. In leaked strategy memos, officials warn that rapid population growth could outpace Australia's ability to vet, track, and integrate newcomers effectively. In other words, the system might be growing faster than it can manage safely. This concern goes beyond just borders. There's increasing unease about foreign influence, cybersecurity risks, and foreign student networks connected to sensitive technologies and universities. By cutting migration by 80%, proponents argue that Australia can regain control over who enters the country, from where, and for what purpose, without stretching security agencies thin. But this line of thinking isn't without critics. Human rights advocates say it leans dangerously into fear-mongering, using national security as a vague catch-all to justify aggressive policies. Still, in an era of geopolitical tensions, from China's growing power to cyber warfare, it's no surprise that security is creeping into immigration discussions. So while it may not grab headlines like housing or jobs, national security is becoming a quiet force behind Australia's immigration rethink, and it may be shaping more of the policy than most people realise. Number 5. Australia's environment can't handle unlimited growth. Australia is often seen as a vast open land, endless coastlines, big skies, and space to spare. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the country is uninhabitable. In fact, over 85% of the population lives near the coast, crammed into just a handful of cities. And as the population rises, so does the strain on natural resources, especially water, energy, and arable land. Experts have warned for years that Australia's fragile ecosystem isn't built for unchecked growth. Droughts are becoming more frequent, water reservoirs are running low, and bushfire seasons are getting longer and more destructive. With every million new residents, the demand for water, food, energy, and waste management increases, and the environment is starting to push back. One internal environmental assessment linked to the leaked documents claimed that Australia's carrying capacity may have already been exceeded. Urban sprawl is swallowing natural habitats, and infrastructure expansion is putting more pressure on already stressed ecosystems. Cutting immigration, in this view, is not just a social or economic decision, it's a climate resilience strategy. But here's where things get even more complex. Some argue that blaming migrants for environmental decline is unfair. They point out that the real problem lies in unsustainable consumption patterns and poor urban planning, not the people arriving. Still, with climate models predicting harsher droughts and resource scarcity in the coming decades, the government is clearly weighing long-term survival against short-term growth. Could Australia be trying to quietly transition into an eco-limited nation, one that caps population in order to preserve its future? If so, the 80% immigration cut might not be just a response to public pressure, it might be part of a much larger environmental pivot. If this video gave you a new perspective, drop a comment. We read every single one, and your voice matters more than you think. We pour hours into creating these deep dives, so if you found it valuable, hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. Number 6. Wages are stagnating, and immigration is taking the blame. Walk into any break room, pub, or family dinner across Australia, and you'll hear the same frustration. Why haven't wages gone up? While the cost of living soars, paychecks have barely moved, and many are pointing fingers at high levels of immigration as a key reason why. The logic, at least from critics, goes like this. More workers, it's more competition. Employers don't need to raise wages when they have a steady stream of skilled and unskilled migrants ready to fill roles. In some industries, especially construction, hospitality, and retail, unions claim that wages have actually declined in real terms over the past decade, even as profits for major corporations have climbed. According to the leaked documents, internal labour briefings have urged the government to reconsider current migration levels, warning that sustained wage suppression could lead to mass public discontent. Slashing immigration, they argue, would give local workers more bargaining power, create tighter job markets, and potentially force employers to pay fairer wages. Of course, this is a controversial claim. Many economists argue that migrants don't just take jobs, they create them. By spending money, starting businesses, and contributing to innovation, immigrants actually fuel economic growth. But those long-term benefits aren't always felt by people struggling to pay rent this month. That's where the emotional tension lies, between macroeconomic theory and real-world pressure. Whether fair or not, the perception that immigrants are taking our jobs is spreading, and politicians are paying attention. Cutting immigration may be less about economics, and more about calming a workforce that's starting to lose patience. Number 7. National identity is becoming a silent battleground. Australia has always prided itself on being a multicultural success story. A country where people from every corner of the globe can build a life and call it home. But quietly, beneath the surface, a cultural tension is growing. Some Australians are starting to ask a loaded question. What does it mean to be Australian anymore? This isn't just about accents or flags, it's about rapid cultural transformation. In certain suburbs, English is no longer the primary language. Local customs, holidays, and even food options are shifting. And while diversity is often celebrated, others feel like they're losing their sense of familiarity in the very places they grew up in. Whether it's fair or not, there's a growing fear among some communities that Australian values and identity are being diluted. The leaked documents reveal that this cultural anxiety isn't being ignored in policy circles. In fact, several internal reports cite concerns over integration rates, social cohesion, and a rising sense of us versus them thinking. Some officials argue that by drastically reducing immigration, the country would gain time to stabilise culturally and rebuild a shared national identity. But this is deeply controversial. Supporters of immigration argue that Australia's identity is constantly evolving, and that's a strength, not a threat. They warn that framing immigration as a cultural risk can lead to division, racism, and political extremism. Still, it's clear that for many voters, this isn't just about numbers. It's about who they feel they're becoming as a nation. And that question, perhaps more than any other, is why immigration has become such a flashpoint in Australian politics. Number 8. The education system is struggling to keep up. Walk through the campus of any major Australian university and you'll notice a trend. International students are everywhere, and that's no accident. Education has become one of Australia's biggest industries, worth over $40 billion a year. But behind the booming numbers lies a growing concern. The education system is reaching its limits. Universities have become financially dependent on international students, who often pay 3 to 4 times more than domestic ones. To keep the cash flowing, institutions have ramped up intake, but not infrastructure. This means overcrowded lecture halls, understaffed faculties, and a drop in education quality that's starting to affect both local and international students. And it's not just universities feeling the heat. Public schools in immigrant-heavy areas are bursting at the seams. Class sizes are ballooning, and resources are stretched thin. In some regions, language barriers, cultural gaps, and teacher shortages are creating real challenges in the classroom. According to the leaked documents, education officials have warned that unless migration is scaled back, schools may simply fail to meet the demand. Some critics argue that education is becoming less about learning and more about business. They say the system is prioritizing profit over quality, and that mass student migration is driving this imbalance. Others counter that international students bring cultural diversity, innovation, and long-term benefits to the economy. But for now, the cracks are undeniable, and behind the scenes, policymakers are starting to view the education sector not just as a source of revenue, but as a pressure point that could collapse under its own weight. Cutting immigration may be their way of buying time before the system breaks. Number 9. Big business is losing its grip on the immigration narrative. For years, corporations, universities, and property developers have quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, been the biggest winners of Australia's high immigration policies. More people mean more renters, shoppers, students, and workers, and that means more profits. It's no secret that high population growth helps drive the economy, at least on the surface. But here's what the leaked documents suggest. The tide may be turning. Some government insiders now argue that mass migration has been used as a tool to prop up industries that aren't actually creating long-term, sustainable value. Developers push for more housing, universities chase student fees, employers rely on cheap temporary labour, and who pays the price? Everyday Australians struggling with rising costs, stagnant wages, and overcrowded cities. By slashing immigration by 80%, the government could be trying to reset the balance of power, away from big business and back toward ordinary voters. It's a message that says, we're no longer letting corporate profits dictate national policy. Whether it's just political theatre or a genuine shift is still up for debate, but the symbolism is powerful. Of course, this doesn't sit well with everyone. Lobbyists and business groups are already pushing back hard, warning of labour shortages, GDP slumps, and damage to international reputation. But public opinion is changing fast, and politicians are starting to ask a different question. Is endless growth actually worth it? This isn't just an economic adjustment, it's a potential power play, signalling that the era of big business dominating Australia's immigration agenda might finally be coming to an end. Number 10. Australia is quietly following a global shift. If you think Australia's potential 80% immigration cut is shocking, take a look around the world. It's not alone. In recent years, countries like Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, and even the United States have all made sharp U-turns on immigration policy. Once known for being open and welcoming, these nations are now tightening borders, cutting visas, and putting nationals first. Why? Because they're all facing the same storm: rising housing costs, political unrest, cultural clashes, and overstretched public systems. The post-pandemic era has triggered a kind of global reset, where leaders are rethinking whether mass migration is still the solution, or if it's become a political liability. In this light, Australia's leaked plan doesn't seem so radical. In fact, it might be part of a coordinated shift in Western policymaking. Sources suggest that Australia has been closely watching how other nations have managed backlash, economic downturns, and migration fatigue. The idea is simple: learn from their mistakes, strike early, and control the narrative before public anger turns into political chaos. An 80% cut may seem extreme, but it's being framed, behind closed doors, as a strategic move to avoid future fallout. So while the headlines talk about housing and wages, the deeper story might be that Australia is just joining the next global chapter, one where immigration is no longer a growth engine, but a risk to be managed. Whether that's a smart recalibration or a dangerous retreat is something only time will tell. So, what does it all mean? Australia, a country known for its welcoming spirit and multicultural identity, may now be preparing to make one of the boldest immigration cuts in modern history, up to 80% according to leaked internal documents. But this isn't about one single issue. It's a storm of economic pressure, infrastructure failure, political gamesmanship, cultural tension, and a world that's shifting around us. From housing affordability to climate sustainability, from overwhelmed hospitals to identity politics, the reasons behind this secretive policy shift are complex and sometimes uncomfortable. Some view it as a necessary step to restore balance and national stability. Others see it as a dangerous move that could damage Australia's global reputation and social fabric for generations. But one thing is clear: this isn't just about immigration numbers. It's about what kind of future Australians want to build. Are we reacting out of fear or planning with purpose? Are we shrinking back from the world or finding a smarter way to engage with it? These are not easy questions, and there are no simple answers. But as more documents leak and debates intensify, one thing is certain: Australia is standing at a crossroads, and the choices made in the next few years will define not just who can enter the country, but what kind of country it will become.